Is it just me, or is it getting a bit consumerist in the dance scene? Let's discuss it. Now, this is largely a critique of the European swing dance scene where I primarily work, but I believe it applies to other contexts too. Specifically, I want to talk about how to frame this question of consumerism in the swing dance scene, how we engage in jazz dance, especially social dancing versus classes, the specifically non-consumerist origins of the dance, and potentially some ways that we can engage in jazz dance in a less consumerist fashion. Let's get into it. Now, what is a consumerist culture? For the purposes of this video, let's say a consumerist culture is a culture that is hyper-focused on the exchange of money for goods and services. I pay for a service, I receive that service, or transactional type interactions. So here are a few different ways to frame basically the same question. Is the swing dance community getting more consumerist? What elements of consumerism can we observe and identify in our dance scene? Does the surrounding consumer capitalist cultural hegemony influence the way we operate in the dance scene? And if so, in what ways? Now, I'm not going to answer all of these questions directly, but might kind of set the stage for this discussion and for further discussion afterwards. So, my first time ever going to a swing dance in Columbus, Ohio in 2013, my friend and I got to the dance late and we missed the 30-minute beginner class. But a friendly dancer on the side was willing to show us a basic step, and that was enough that we could get out on the floor and just try. So much of the beginning of my swing dance journey was just about learning by doing and trying to emulate what I saw on the social floor. Then eventually I saw some people swinging out and I said, what is that and how do I learn it? And soon after that, I started taking classes at the OSU Swing Dance Club. So I learned a lot from classes and workshops, and that played an important role in my learning process. But for me, social dancing has always been and continues to be the central, most important way to engage in jazz dance. Here's the thing though. It seems like in some cases in the scene, classes have become the sort of main hobby of some people, while social dancing, which is to me the real thing, kind of takes a back seat. Many people devote 1 hour a week to this dance and it's class. They don't actually go social dancing. So to me, this kind of represents some of that consumerism. Like, I pay for the service for someone to give me Lindy Hop, and that's how I engage in it. And there are a few effects of this. I think people can tend to get used to being told what to do, and so they don't actually get comfortable with improvising, which is, of course, a central value of the dance. At its worst, dancing for fun or just, for a human connection, for the experience of it, becomes secondary to something else. There can also emerge a sort of drama in the swing dance scene about something external to dancing, which is something like dance level, which to me doesn't really exist in any objective sense, but I think that's probably the topic for a whole other video. There's this drama of, did I advance to the highest level in the auditions? Or am I good enough to dance with the teachers and advanced dancers over there? Or how many moves do I know? How well can I technically execute this material that I've learned in class? Instead of, how can I express myself and enjoy this music? Speaking of a structured environment, I believe the way that we dance and the kind of experiences we have while dancing in a class setting are fundamentally different from what we can experience in a social dance environment. I'd even argue if you only take class and you don't go social dancing, you're not really a real Lindy Hopper yet. In class, you can, of course, gain some of the skills needed, but until you go out to a social floor, you're not really doing the real thing. Kind of like practice versus play. If I'm learning a new instrument and all I do is sit at home and practice scales, is that really playing the instrument? I mean, technically it's going through some of the skills, but it's not really doing the real thing that we actually consider to be music. And in my opinion, it's never too early to start to enjoy the music and playfulness of social dancing. I want to shout out a great dancer and scholar, Dr. Marie Njai, who has done many culture talks around at different festivals. Maybe you've heard her speak before. She often shares this concept, and I'm not sure if I get the terms exactly right, but the idea of a community of practice versus a community of care. In my interpretation, a community of practice is a group of people who get together and bond over one thing and only do that one thing, and that's the end of how they engage with each other. So if you come together and you only dance, you don't really talk or chat, you don't hang out outside of dancing, probably it's a community of practice. And this to me is more in the lines of like the consumerist, like, oh, I'm gonna go, buy a Lindy Hop class and that's how I do it. I want to practice and be good at the thing, but I don't care about like my social connections with people. Versus a community of care, which involves actual human connection and goes beyond just the one particular activity that you might bond over. Like you can still, of course, as a community of care, enjoy an activity together and share your enthusiasm for it with each other, but it's not the only point, right? And you're not like sort of buying and selling these packaged services and experiences as the main activity. You could do this without any exchange of money, right? You could get together in community and just dance because of the music. But I like class. It helps me learn new things and I enjoy it. And I get it. Learning new moves is exciting. And the structured environment of class is an easy and comfortable way to access training. And there's nothing wrong fundamentally with paying teachers to share their skills. I'm not against classes as a whole, but at the end of the day, Lindy Hop was never meant to be just a classroom or studio activity. It's meant to be social, spontaneous, fun, and playful, and something you do, not just something you study. Now, let's take it back a bit to the roots of Lindy Hop. If you think about the time and place and community where this dance came from, which is, by the way, early 1900s, United States of America, African American communities. If we're talking about Lindy Hop, specifically Harlem, New York. The originators of this dance, dancers like Frankie Manning and Norma Miller, who are second generation Lindy Hoppers, all the legendary dancers from Harlem and all the dancers that we have never heard of, they were not learning their moves in a classroom. They learned primarily on the social dance floor and training on their own. In both Frankie and Norma's autobiographies, they both describe early experiences they had with dancing, and neither of them involved being in a classroom and being told what to do and how to dance. Dancers from the original era were learning through social exchange and imitation in dance halls like the Savoy Ballroom and in the streets of Harlem. In fact, even the idea of taking a dance class was not really a thing to the originators.
If you start counting and talking like that with me, I don't talk to you. I talk only at the level where the music is.
We weren't counters, we were dancers. And we were feelers. We felt what we were doing, so we just did it. We didn't even know there were counts to it. What they need to learn is the feel, the soul of what they're doing. I mean, most of them, if you can count, they can learn. But that's not our way. Like I tell people now, I say, well, you can forget about counting because if you listen to music, that music is counting for you. And this is what we did. We danced to the music. And so that music is counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just try to stay with that music, dance on that music, They just have to learn feeling because there's a lot of them out there. They do some fantastic stuff. But there's no feeling to what they're doing.
This is an excerpt from a wonderful documentary called Everything Remains Raw, put together by Monsell Ilcosby Durden. It's an amazing documentary about the commodification and consumerism in hip-hop dance, and it goes over a lot of history, which includes jazz dancing. So, well worth taking a look at the whole documentary. The link is in the description. Now, you might be thinking, wasn't there any form of structured education around dance? And yeah, there was, but that kind of formal environment wasn't something for the originators. It was mainly the people who were appropriating the dance style that were giving these kinds of classes. Ones who saw the opportunity to package it and sell it to a white, wealthy audience. And these people weren't out social dancing every weekend necessarily. They were putting out a watered down, often simplified, commercial version of swing dance. And that's where taking class started to show up in a more formalized, structured way. But again, what we really consider the spirit of Lindy Hop, the core of the thing that we're doing, the creativity, the improvisation, the connection, the social interactions, these come from social exchanges happening in places like the Savoy Ballroom, not from learning steps in a studio. So when we talk about learning Lindy Hop today, it's worth asking ourselves, are we getting closer to that spirit of spontaneity, connection, and social interaction that the dance was built on? Or are we turning it into something that's more about consuming a packaged, classroom-based product? So what do we do about this? I am not arguing that we should abolish class altogether. In some ways, it's just more about an attitude shift. Like, on a more positive note, that we have been holding Lindy Hop classes has been shifting somewhat, I think for the better. But in general, there's a lot of experimentation and different approaches being tested out. I know I and many other swing dance teaching artists have been in discussion about this. And basically, we have been trying to answer the question of how can we teach swing dancing in a rooted, non-appropriative way, despite the fact that the dance is fundamentally different in a studio-based environment versus a social dance environment. And despite the fact that this dance was developed in a particular community, the Black American community, who has been historically exploited by white people who appropriate the culture and profit from the commodification and sale of those cultural products. But again, that's the topic of another video. So at some point when I make that video, I'll link it right here. So what are some ways that we can engage in the scene that specifically don't feed a consumerist kind of approach? Okay, let's see. Shift the balance of how you spend your time in the scene towards more social dancing and less class. Create your own alternative spaces to practice and train that don't involve exchange of money. Host your own practice session, share with your peers, exchange some steps with each other on the social dance floor. If you happen to be a teacher, take some time to reflect on your teaching approach about how your teaching enables and encourages social dancing. But if we focused on teaching people how to hear and listen to the music, how to communicate through movement, and how to enjoy and open our hearts in social dance spaces, sure, of course we should still be teaching moves and steps, that's part of the tradition. But let's make sure that we're emphasizing that Lindy Hop and other swing dances are about connection and about social dancing, not just collecting moves. Sure, if you're a teacher or organizer, business is business, and it's important that the community is enabled to thrive and survive financially. But if it becomes only business, this thing loses its soul. So it's easier said than done. And I don't envy the full-time organizers who have to sort of thread this needle. There is more nuance to this discussion for sure, because it's not like there shouldn't be any economy around swing dancing. So I'm not saying it's just as easy as, you know, divesting from capitalism and not using any money exchange ever again. We do exist within this larger system. But the question that I want to throw out there is an open one. How do we engage in the ways that we have to with monetary exchange without that being the whole thing, without letting that influence the core culture of what we really care about in this thing? So that's all of my opinions for today. I know this can be a little bit controversial. You know, some of y'all probably love the structure of classes and festivals as it is, but I just think it's important that we stay true to what makes Lindy Hop so special. The social connection, the improvisation, the spontaneity, the social part of the social dancing. So what do you think? Have you noticed this kind of trend in the scene? Do you think it's affecting how people learn and dance this dance? Please do leave a comment to share your thoughts. And if you've enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. That's the best way to support this new channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.